Well, let's turn then to the comedian Dave Chawner, who's also a vegan, we ought to stress, and the farmer and writer Jamie Blackett, who I presume, Jamie, is not.
Sorry, no, I'm certainly not a vegan, and I'm also a dairy farmer, as well as being an arable farmer.
Exactly. Dave, tell us why you are a vegan.
I was worried about that long pause then. I thought you converted another one, Colin. You know what I mean? I think, for me, everyone's got different reasons. It could be environmental. Actually, mine are incredibly esoteric. Like, no one likes a vegan. Least of all, vegans don't like vegans. So I've got very specific reasons, actually based on 15th century philosophy. So feel free to direct all your hate at me. But I just kind of think, for me, you know what? I've never been a massive meat eater. If I give up having a little bit of milk here, a bit of cheese there, I'm not perfect at it. It's easy for me.
Jamie, it would seem to outsiders that if there's hate being directed in any direction, it's been directed towards traditional meat and dairy farmers like you.
Yes, I think that's right. And I think also the vegan lobby is quite a powerful one, because the big food, the global food conglomerates, have worked out that there's a much bigger margin to be made by growing, making these highly processed vegan foods from vegetable oils, from soya, from lots of different things that they cobble together into ersatz meat or milk. And there is this sort of powerful, unholy alliance now between corporate capitalism and anti-capitalists. Many of the vegans are part of this sort of Extinction Rebellion and that kind of thing. And I think, I'm really pleased that GBNews is airing this subject, because on the BBC, you get quite a lot of George Monbiot and Chris Packham pushing veganism.
I mean, to be fair, when I think of my own just-turned 17-year-old daughter, I mean, I don't think she holds to the values of Extinction Rebellion. She just thinks it's a healthy alternative. Dave, you were chuckling.
Yeah.
I was chuckling. Not all of us are sitting here in mud huts wearing woad while, training the cow to go to market. A lot of us, actually, of course, there are extremes. And I also think there are extremes of dairy farmers. But that doesn't mean that taking the extreme is the middleman.
No, that's right. But I think there is a certain amount of sort of food wokery, political correctness around veganism. And I think the cows, we've been sort of conditioned, society has been conditioned to think that cows are bad, when of course they're not. They're actually part of the solution rather than the problem. A cow, from its back end through its dung, can create a fifth of its own body weight in insects every year. And the reason we've lost so much biodiversity in the British countryside is actually because we've got far fewer cows in many parts of the country. And we've also been guilty as farmers. We've been worming our cattle too much, which has meant that the cow pats are not as rich as insect life as they should be. But the sort of regenerative farming systems, rotational systems, where the cattle on my farm, they mob graze. So you get groups of about 300 cattle on small 10-acre paddocks for a matter of 12 hours. And they then go back to those paddocks 3 weeks later. And that mimics exactly what happens in nature. And that is so much better for the environment. And you can actually see the topsoil growing on the arable part of my farm. If it wasn't for the ability to put animal manures on, we would actually be losing topsoil every year. Now, that's important, because that is carbon that is either in the ground or in the atmosphere as nitrogen and CO2 as the greenhouse gases. And if you've got grazed land, it's also far more water retentive. And water vapor is a very powerful greenhouse gas as well. We actually want healthy soils, and that's why we need cattle in the countryside. I think we're also being conditioned to think somehow that meat is bad for us, despite the fact that we evolved as meat eaters. We need saturated fats. I know that Dave is very keen on mental health. Our brains are actually 60% animal fats, and we can only get the important omega fats that we need for good mental health from grass-fed meat and dairy. That's full of all the right healthy omegas. And you're not going to get that from almond milk.
No. Dave, I'll venture that when you got up this morning, you didn't think you'd be here at 8 o'clock talking about the consistency of cow pats, but that to one side. When you look at, my daughter's cohort coming through, and you listen to what Jamie Blackett explains about a complicated relationship between science and business and nature, I wonder, maybe you wonder too, about whether everybody who is turning vegan, people like my daughter, are really considering this in all the round with all its complexities.
Of course they're not. We're getting on with our days. We've got the younger generation have had their exams screwed up by Gavin Williamson, something, mental. So actually, I think most people are just thinking, you know what, it's a small change that I can make that, yes, ideally, things like soya milk and almond milk aren't great. Why not oat milk? Tiny little change. Don't really notice it in my coffee. Lovely stuff.
I mean, it's obvious you're flexible on this. Nobody could accuse you of being a zealot about it. But I just wonder, do you have any misgivings at all, Dave, about the fact that veganism is now, in law, a protected characteristic? I mean, I don't think that's going to stop conversations like this about the merits or otherwise of it. But I do worry sometimes when topics which hitherto you've been able to, invey as much as you like, become part of equality legislation, as it now is.
Look, bottom line, I genuinely think a lot of people on the left still invite debate. Let's have the debate. And you know what? Even over this, I've learned a lot of stuff that I didn't know that, probably change my mind and improve things for the better. And also, I kind of see this on the flip side as well of I don't want to get rid of dairy farmers. Absolutely, crack on with what you're doing. But if we get another industry in Great Britain of being the world leader of veganism, the world leader of manufacturing vegan food, who has to lose out on that?
Jamie, we've got about a minute or so left. I mean, you'd acknowledge, I'm sure, wouldn't you, that intensive agriculture hasn't done farmers a lot of favours over the years. Things like the intensive use of antibiotics and the breeding of certain types of dairy cow for maximised production, for instance. But it does seem to be changing now. You mentioned that word regenerative a while ago. Just explain again what it means to people.
Yeah, I mean, the irony is that a lot of these arguments are actually quite last century because the progressive farmers in this country are adopting these regenerative techniques. They were started in the end of the 20th century by Alan Seaver in Africa, where that grazing animals in the way I've described is particularly good for the environment.
No, he's gone. He faltered,
See,
and finally...
It's vegan Wi-Fi, Colin. It's too weak to work. That's what it is.
Curse that vegan Wi-Fi. Dave Chawner and, if he ever comes back, Jamie Blackett too. Appreciate your time. Dave, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.